What is going on, guys? This is Miasin. So today I wanted to make a tier list video on the best board breakers to play this format because I've already made one for the best hand shops and obviously for the best decks and the best budget decks coming up very soon. By the way, I just have to kind of think about what are the best possible options if you are a brokey, aka if you're basically like me. But yeah, anyways, before we go any further, friendly reminder to smash the like and subscribe button. You already know the drill, and now let's get right into it. And so obviously I have 4 sections as usual. So must main, the cards that you know, if you're not playing in your main deck, you're doing something wrong. And then the cards that you obviously have to have in your side deck at the very least if you're not main decking them, or some other board breakers that might be a little more situational, and the absolute dog shit one. So the first card is Lava Golem, and this one completely depends on the deck that you're playing, because if you Lava Golem your opponent just like Sphere mode, you're giving up on your normal summon. So if your deck really needs a normal summon, this card really conflicts with it. But if you're playing like a trap deck or Runic Stun, could be Labyrinth, Dinomorphia, etc. I mean, the Dinomorphia maybe a little less, and Sphere mode is obviously like pretty much on the same league. Sometimes usually like worse than Lava Golem, sometimes it's better. It depends because you have to tribute 3 monsters and you can only Sphere mode your opponent twice. But if you have 2 Lava Golem, you can double Lava Golem your opponent, so that's nice. So you can basically make him lose like 4 cards, and then, you know, in time your opponent takes 2k, and if your opponent cannot go into battle phase, then you can actually just win with 2 Lava Golem and nothing else. So it can make you win unwinnable games, unlike Sphere mode. Well, to be fair, even then, you get back to Sphere mode and then your opponent can't target it, and then you can just survive for a long time in simplified game state. So both of these cards are definitely decent. Okay, now we've got Spellbound, and this is actually a really nice one, but I would not necessarily say like you have to side deck it, because it really does depend. This one, the issue that I have with Spellbound is that it's very specific on the deck that you're playing against, because these decks, it really depends on the deck that you're playing them in. But Spellbound, like, it's good against like Purely, obviously, because you use it when they use the trap card and then they can't summon their monster on top. Or then if you're playing against like Flunderies, when they're trying to tribute summon, you can chain Spellbound and then they can't summon the Rise on your turn. Or against like I don't know, IP Masquerade trying to link off, you can also use that. So it's not too bad. Even against Tenpai Dragon, it's fine, but it only affects the monsters that are currently there, so it doesn't linger. So that's my issue with it. Otherwise, it would have been like in the must side, or even must not really in the must main category. It's kind of like a Wars D-Barrier, but a D-Barrier quick play spell card. But again, only for the monsters currently there, so it does have some massive limitations. Ultimate Slayer is... I'm not a super big fan of it, because it does target, so there's a lot of things that you can't really do too well with it. It's pretty bad against Melodious, because even though you would want to believe that, yeah, you can bounce back their monster and then send Entis and destroy something, if you got the area on the field, you can't target any of their monsters. So that's my issue, right? And against like Snake Eyes, unless you're sending like the Trouble Sunny Link monster, and then you play the break to make this card work, usually like very bad card economy, because your opponent does so much with one card. And Ultimate Slayer, even though it's not once per turn, so drawing multiples can be good, it's just not the current... It's not the right format for this card. But it's a good card overall. It's just that you're gonna have to wait until it becomes better. Okay, Change of Heart is insane. Very good card. Anything that steals monsters is good this format. And Change of Heart is one of the better ones. Obviously, it's objectively better than Mind Control. The only difference is that it's at 1, and Mind Control is a 3. But this card being able to steal Appaloosa if your opponent doesn't have Veiler or Ogre or Imperm, it's definitely gonna make you break the board even more. Like, you can basically play through like 5 interruptions through like with Change of Heart, because now you're stealing your opponent's negates and you're using your opponent's negates on like his other interruptions. So it's really nasty. There's a good reason why people are playing that. Regi is also a very interesting one. If you're playing a deck like Tenpai Dragon that just struggles against annoying monsters like Empen, for example, Regi can be your best friend, because even though you can handtrap your opponent to death, your opponent usually makes a half board, and Regi is very good against half boards, but it's really bad against like full, already established boards. Like, for example, one single Snake Eye Ash, the board already beats Regi, because it makes an Appaloosa summon with IP Masquerade, so it's indestructible by card effect, and then the IP is in the spell and trap zone, and it can be summoned off of the Flamberge or Divine Temple. And if you Regi, the only thing that dies is Flamberge, but then that summons back 2 far monsters, which makes the Princess live, and it also makes the IP have another monster to link off with. So Regi is actually really bad against the best decks, but it's somewhat fine if you're already playing a bunch of hand shops in Tenpai Dragon. So I don't know if it's like necessarily better or worse than Lightning Storm, but as a card, I think it's a little too situational. But again, if you're playing it in Tenpai Dragon, it's not too bad. Swords of Concealing Light is really bad. There's nothing here for me to say. Duster is a card that absolutely has to be in your side deck, at the very least, right? It's a one-of, and there's really just nothing bad with this card. I mean, it's a must-side deck card that can also be replaced with Cosmic Cyclone. Same logic with Lightning Storm. These two cards are just amazing. Evenly Matched is a card that I would either have at the very bottom of must-side or at the very, like, top of evenly... depends on side. Because if your deck requires the battle phase, such as Tenpai Dragon, you cannot play evenly. But there are some decks that play evenly really well, like runic-based strategies, because you don't need hand traps and then you just let your opponent do everything, and then you can have, like, all the runic spells to, like, break negates, and then you resolve evenly. Or if your opponent keeps, like, one card, even if it's, like, an apple for 4, you can go Flashing Fire Destroy or Freezing Curses Negate, Runic Tip, search the card that outs the apple. So that's the reason why I really like it in certain decks. But I would not necessarily splash it in every single one of my side decks, because if you're also playing a lot of hand traps in your deck, evenly conflicts with hand traps, because the goal of hand traps is to prevent your opponent from getting to a certain place, and the goal of board breakers is to punish your opponent for getting to a certain place. So if you're kind of trying to meet in the middle, it's just not gonna work. Evenly is gonna be really awkward, and sometimes you might have a hand trap and then just not hand trap your opponent, and then evenly, and then the hand trap just doesn't really have full value. So that is my issue with this card. If you play it, you really have to have a really strong, well-defined game plan preemptively. Triple Tactic Talent is an extremely good card, maybe the best card in this section, but I would still not necessarily say you have to main deck it. It does depend though, because if anything, this might be the best card to main deck this format. So you know what, I might actually put it here, but for the sake of this video's credibility, I guess I'm just gonna put it in must side, because that is like my personal thoughts on it, right? I'm not like doing this video just to have like certain cards in all 4 sections. You know, if board breakers don't necessarily have to be somewhere and they have to be like somewhere else, then that's where they're gonna be. I hope that makes sense, right? That kind of sounded confusing, but basically what I meant is, even though it would look nice to put it here, I don't really believe that it deserves to be a main deck staple. Like, you can definitely get away without main decking Talent, and that would be fine. Even in the best decks, like Pure Snake Eyes, Hurricane Snake Eyes, etc. Because I main deck 3 in YCS Rio, and it was hands down one of the worst cards in my deck. Maybe 3 talents and 40 cards is mathematically incorrect, but maybe I just got unlucky as well. Forbidden Droplet follows the same logic. I mean, they're like in the same league, right? They're good going first and second, because Droplet, you can set it, and it's pretty much like a worse Imperm, but still an Imperm. And then Talent, you really want to pray that you get a hand trapped, otherwise this card just does nothing. If your opponent has board breakers, then your Talent just also did nothing. Blink Out. This card is an anti-link monster, but it's really bad. There's really no way for me to justify this card because it's a 1-for-1. Basically, what it does is you target one link monster on the field, return it back to the extra deck, and then if the materials are in your graveyard, you get to revive back one of them. So it's pretty much Defusion, but for links. Definitely not a good card whatsoever. That I can guarantee you that. Mind Control would always be exactly right after a Change of Heart, and then Snatch Steal would probably be after Mind Control, because it can get hit by Cosmic Cyclone, or I don't know, maybe I'm overthinking, maybe it's not even that relevant, and I don't know, I just feel like if you lose access to, like, if the Snatch Steal dies, you give back the monster, and it's just a little sus. Change of Heart is just a little safer to use. It's not really like you're trying to search a monster or, like, keep it permanently anyways, so I don't even think it being an equip spell matters that much. So that's the reason why I think it's just worse than these these other equip spells, but again, maybe I'm wrong, maybe this card is a little better, but I doubt it. Maybe it's in the middle as well, but for now, I'll just put it at the very bottom, which is still fine. It's still a really good card. Kashtira Fenir is another card that I'm just so iffy on. Like, it's such a good card. You can easily main deck it or side deck it, depending on the deck that you're playing. If you're playing the Kashtira Snake Eyes, I mean, it's a non-engine card that also kind of has something to do with your engine that you're already playing in the main deck that you can search. Honestly, it's really, really good. So I would probably put it at the very top of the section. But again, you can probably get away with not main decking this card whatsoever, because if you are playing Nibiru, that conflicts with Fenir, so you really have to choose one or the other, because obviously if you nib your opponent, then you control a monster, which is the Nibiru, and then on your turn, you won't be able to summon the Fenrir, so that is not really ideal. Anyways, Triple Tactic Thrust, this is super situational. It's not like Talent, which can almost always be used. This one, yeah, you gotta play like a certain deck to be able to really abuse the normal trap card that you're setting. Like in Unchained, for example, you were getting a normal trap card that you had no intention of like flipping, but rather destroying with your monsters to keep playing, so it made sense. If you can do that in like other decks, then that would be fine. Otherwise, it's usually just meh. In Despia, for example, you get the fusion duplication to mimic the branded fusion when you get ashed. So that's the reason why it's a really good card in that deck. Super Poly is like super situational as well. I actually think it's a really bad card because a lot of the really annoying monsters that people are summoning right now, they all have different attributes. Like Appaloosa is wind, and then Zealantis is water. They usually end on that if they want to play around Super Poly. And they can also end on like Flamberge and IP, so a fire and a dark. There's almost nothing to Super Poly into. I think this card is like, even though it looks good on in theory, it's actually really bad in practice when you get to play it. It's just a bad Yu-Gi-Oh card, I think. The monster that you summon off of Super Poly is broken. Well, sorry, I take that back. It's a good Yu-Gi-Oh card because your opponent can't respond, but Super Poly is just as good as whatever fusion monster you get to summon. So if the fusion monster is like completely unrealistic or it's a bad card, then Super Poly is also a bad card. So that, yeah, I think that's like the best way to put it, but it's not in a good position at the moment. Dark Hole is bad because nobody's trying to give you like Raw's Disciple or Ibli. I don't know, like those monsters, Ido the Magical Warrior. If anything, you're getting hit by Gimmick Puppet Nightmare. So it doesn't really matter if you have like Dark Hole or Regeki because you're not going to be able to play the game. Usually the moment when Dark Hole is better than Regeki is when people give you a monster that has like a continuous effect that screws you over. Or if you're playing like Exorcister or Kashtira and you cannot afford to have a monster on the field, otherwise it's going to screw you up. Anyways, Book of Eclipse is extremely good. I'd probably put it in the very bottom of must side because, yeah, it does a lot, honestly. It's really good against Purely. Obviously, it's good against, I don't know, my brain stopped functioning. It's really bad against Despia. It's good against Voice's Voice. A bunch of decks, honestly. It's good against Rogue in general. Santa Claus, okay, so that's obviously going to be, like, very close to all the Kaijus and stuff. It's a little better, maybe, than Regeki. Can't be negated, obviously. It's an inherent action. And it's also a little better than Kaijus if you're playing Tenpai Dragon, because the Kaijus, you can only Kaiju your opponent once at a time. If you Kaiju and then you're gonna have to like clear the Kaiju and then Kaiju again. Oh, where's Santa Claus? You don't care. You just go Santa Claus, Santa Claus, Santa Claus. And you still have your normal summon, which is nice. The one issue is that if you don't kill your opponent draws a card on the end phase, which usually means you die, but Tenpai Dragon is a go big or go home deck anyway, so it doesn't really matter too much. And hold on a second. So that's the Kaiju. Yeah, okay. Yeah, no, that's pretty much it. Kurikara, I actually don't even think you need to side deck this card at all. Like, it's nice as a one-of, right? If you're playing, if you think you're gonna play against Purely, but they can also play around it. So I don't know if, or they don't even have to because the odds of you even having the Kurikara are super low. So I think it's gonna not be of any relevance the majority of the time. Like, I remember at the very beginning of the format, everybody had the Kurikara because everybody was expecting Purely, but nobody was playing that deck, so now people are removing Kurikara, so Purely is a little better, but people are still not playing Kurikara. I'm still seeing a few, but not enough. It's a fine card, but I'm gonna put it at the very top just because one copy is all you need. You don't need to play like 3 because it's super easy to search. Herald of the Abyss, that is a weird card. Not really good at the moment. Probably better than Regeki though, but I mean, it's a normal spell card. It's a 1-for-1. That's all it really does, so Dark Ruler no more. This is definitely, like, depending on the side deck. If you're playing, like, Flunderies, it's a must-main, for sure. But, obviously, generically speaking, you shouldn't main deck a card like Dark Ruler. It's only good going second, and you can't OTK. So, yeah, imagine playing Dark Ruler and Tenpai Dragon. Yeah, that would make no sense whatsoever. It's in pretty much the same league as Evenly Matched, so I'm gonna put it there. Maybe a little better than Super Poly, maybe worse. I don't know. Master King Alpha something, it's trash. It's really bad. Pankratops, on the other hand, I used to believe that it was a little better than Fenrir. I take that back. Fenrir just being able to search itself and give you like a play for next turn or a discard fodder is just really good. And Pankratops doesn't do that, even though it has a nice quick effect and is just like really proactive. Both are level 7 monsters with inherent summoning capabilities. So yeah, very good card, but let's see, probably worse than the Kaijus, at least if you're playing Tenpai Dragon. Enemy Controller is extremely good. Probably comparable to Change of Heart, Mind Control, etc. This one is actually main deckable, so that's the nice part about it. If you're playing like the Fire deck, then that could be one of your non-engine. Enemy Controller, Droplet, Talent, all those cards can definitely be played in your deck. And they can dodge Infinite Impermanence, or dodge like anything that targets, while stealing a monster at the same time. So that's actually not too bad. The effect to like change the battle position of a monster can be relevant at time. Like if your opponent summons like a Baguska, you put it from defense to attack and then it kind of shuts down the effect in a way. yeah, I guess you can also use it as an interruption on the battle phase. Your opponent tries to like attack with one of his Xyz monsters. You put it in defense, and then it did in battle, so your opponent can't go into a Zeus in main phase 2. You don't always have to steal a monster with enemy controller, but the majority of the time you are. But what is really nice about drawing 2 enemy controllers is that you tribute using your monster to steal opponent's monster, and then you tribute that stolen monster to steal another monster. You buy one, get one free. That's how I like to see enemy controller. It's a really cool card. And then we've got Interrupted Kaiju Slumber, which is also terrible. It's worse than Dark Hole. So yeah, forget about it. If anything, Blink Out is even better than... nah, yeah, it's just... I don't know, all these cards are garbage though. I'm not even gonna make a case for them. And finally, the last card is Metal Tronios. This card is remarkably good. It is only good in mirror matches though, which is kind of my issue, but if you're playing a fire deck, then this card covers a lot of ground. Or if you really thought it through, right? If you watch my video and you know how to play this card, and you can even main deck this card. I wouldn't necessarily say you have to main deck it. If anything, you can afford to side deck 3 in fire, or in certain decks, like something that plays Dark Warriors, for example, your opponent summons SP, you banish that. Again, it requires a lot of effort to use. So I think it's worse than Duster and Lightning Storm in terms of playability, but in terms of actual impact, it can be massive, and it's good going first and second. So that's something that we can notice with a lot of the cards here, right? Fenir, Talon, Droplet, Enemy Controller, and then Metal Tronios, Book of Eclipse in a way. The only cards that are obviously garbage going first would be Change of Heart, Mind Control, Snatch Steal, Duster, Lightning Storm. These cards, they do less than nothing going first. And then in this section, there are cards that are just very good for sure, but a little more specific. Like, you can't necessarily play them in every single deck, and their impact might be a little less good. And then obviously the cards in the hot garbage category, you just shouldn't play whatsoever. There is nothing in the must main section, because I just do not believe that you have to play board breakers this format. You can get away with playing 0 of them, and only playing hand shops. That is completely fine. But yeah, that is just my 2 cents. Anyways, that's it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Let me know your thoughts about board breakers and hand shops in the comment section below, and I'll see you guys very soon. Peace.